The title of the Gosho is Opening the Eyes of Wooden and Painted Images. Let's first listen to the background of this Gosho. This letter is thought to have been written in the first year of Bun'ei, 1264, while Nichiren Daishonin was living in Kamakura. But the recipient of the letter is not named. In this letter, the Daishonin deals with the concept of the enlightenment of insentient beings, first in terms of Buddha images and then in terms of the deceased. The letter begins with a reference to the 32 features that the Buddha is said to possess. They represent the Buddha's capacity, virtues, abilities, and so forth. Of the 32 features, 31 can be depicted in pictures or statues. Only the Buddha's pure and far-reaching voice cannot. Next, Nichiren Daishonin compares a wooden or painted image to the living Buddha. Wooden and painted images of the Buddha are inferior to the living Buddha because they lack not only the feature of the pure and far-reaching voice but also the Buddha's mind, that is, his spiritual aspect. The pure and far-reaching voice is the manifestation of the Buddha's mind. The Buddha's compassion to save the people manifests itself in his voice, that is, in his teachings. Thus, when a sutra is placed before a Buddha image, that is, used to open the eyes of the image or consecrated, it is the same as if it possessed a pure and far-reaching voice. This is because a sutra embodies the Buddha's teachings conveyed by his voice. However, the Daishonin goes on to explain that the kind of sutra used to consecrate an image will determine the nature of the spiritual aspect that the image manifests. He concludes that, since the Lotus Sutra embodies the Buddha's true spiritual aspect, when the Lotus Sutra is used to open the eyes of a Buddha image, that image will become equal to the living Buddha. This accords with the principle of the attainment of Buddhahood by plants here representing all insentient life. This concept of the enlightenment of plants in turn derives from the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, which teaches that all life, insentient and sentient, possesses the Buddha nature. Subsequently, the Daishonin sharply attacks the use of true word rituals to open the eyes of Buddha images. He points out that using distorted teachings such as those of the true word to consecrate images will cause demons or devils to occupy them. That is, it will bring forth not the Buddhahood but the diabolical nature inherent in the insentient life of the image, causing suffering for individual believers and disaster for the land in which they live. In the final section, the Daishonin touches on the subject of prayers for the deceased. The idea of the spirit departing from the dead person's body and a demon taking its place actually stems from popular folk belief. The Daishonin employs it to make readily understandable to his contemporaries the concept that the religious conduct of the living has an influence on the lives of those who have passed away. In this context, he explains two levels of enlightenment: the realization of the non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena and the attainment of Buddhahood in one's present form. Both can of course be achieved while one is alive, but since the subject of this letter is the enlightenment of insentient beings, the Daishonin explains both in terms of the deceased, death being life's insentient phase, as represented by the dead person's remains. In the text, a wise person, who simply extols the Lotus Sutra is anyone but a wise person enlightened to the Lotus Sutra that specifically indicates Nichiren Daishonin. The Daishonin embodied his perfect enlightenment to the law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo in the form of the Goan zone. Now listen to the Gosho. The Buddha possesses 32 features. All of them represent the physical aspect. 31 of them, from the lowest, the markings of the 1,000-spoked wheel on the sole of each foot, up to the unseen crown of his head, belong to the category of visible and non-coextensive physical attributes. They can therefore be depicted in tangible form, such as pictures or statues. The remaining feature, the pure and far-reaching voice, belongs to the category of invisible and coextensive physical attributes. It therefore cannot be captured either in a painting or in a wooden image. Since the Buddha's passing, two kinds of images, wooden and painted, have been made of him. They possess 31 features but lack the pure and far-reaching voice. Therefore, they are not equal to the Buddha. They are also devoid of the spiritual aspect. The Buddha in the flesh is as different from a wooden or painted image as the heavens are from the earth, or clouds from mud. Why, then, does the epilogue to the Mahaparinirvana Sutra state that both the living Buddha and a wooden or painted image made of him after his passing bestow equal benefit? Indeed, the Jeweled Necklace Sutra absolutely declares that a wooden or painted image is inferior to the living Buddha. When one places a sutra in front of a wooden or painted image of the Buddha, the image becomes endowed with all 32 features. Yet even though it has the 32 features, without the spiritual aspect it is in no way equal to a Buddha, for even some human and heavenly beings possess the 32 features. When the 5 Precepts Sutra is placed before a wooden or painted image having 31 features, the image becomes equal to a wheel-turning king. When the Discourse on the 10 Good Precepts is placed before it, the image becomes equal to the Lord Chakra. When the Discourse on Emancipation from the World of Desire is placed before it, the image becomes equal to the King Brahma. But in none of these cases does it in any way become equal to a Buddha. When an Agama Sutra is placed in front of a wooden or painted image, the image becomes equal to a voice hearer. When one of the common teachings on wisdom, which were preached at the various assemblies held during the correct and equal and the wisdom periods, is placed before it, the image becomes equal to a cause awakened one. When one of the specific or perfect teachings preached during the flower garland, correct, and equal, or wisdom period is placed before it, the image becomes equal to a bodhisattva. Yet in none of these cases, either, does it in any way become equal to a Buddha. Buddha I's Madra and Mahavairakana's mantra described in the Mahavairakana, Diamond Crown, and Sujatakara Sutras are useless, for although their names represent the Buddha I and the Great Sun, in reality they do not possess these qualities. Similarly, even the Buddha who appears in the Flower Garland Sutra is not the Buddha of the perfect teaching, though his name, Vairocana, suggests that he is. When the Lotus Sutra is placed before an image possessing 31 features, the image never fails to become the Buddha of the pure and perfect teaching. It is for this reason that the Universal Worthy Sutra, referring to the Buddha of the Lotus Sutra, explains, a Buddha's 3 types of bodies are born from this correct and equal sutra. The correct and equal sutra in this phrase does not mean the sutras of the correct and equal period, it indicates the Lotus Sutra. The Universal Worthy Sutra also states, this great vehicle sutra is the eye of the Buddhas. It is through this sutra that the Buddhas are able to acquire the 5 types of vision. The written words of the Lotus Sutra express in visible and non-coextensive form the Buddha's pure and far-reaching voice, which is itself invisible and coextensive, and so possess the 2 physical aspects of color and form. The Buddha's pure and far-reaching voice, which once vanished, has reappeared in the visible form of written words to benefit the people. A person gives utterance to speech on 2 occasions. On one occasion, it is to tell other people what one does not oneself believe in an effort to deceive them. That person's voice in this case accords with others' minds. On the other, it is to voice what one truly has in mind. Thus one's thoughts are expressed in one's voice. The mind represents the spiritual aspect, and the voice, the physical aspect. The spiritual aspect manifests itself in the physical. A person can know another's mind by listening to the voice. This is because the physical aspect reveals the spiritual aspect. The physical and spiritual, which are one in essence, manifest themselves as 2 distinct aspects. Thus the Buddha's mind found expression as the written words of the Lotus Sutra. These written words are the Buddha's mind in a different form. Therefore, those who read the Lotus Sutra must not regard it as consisting of mere written words, for those words are in themselves the Buddha's mind. For this reason, Tian Tai in his commentary states, when the Buddha begins preaching after repeated entreaties from his listeners, he expounds the heart of his teaching. The heart of his teaching is the Buddha's mind, and the Buddha's mind is itself the Buddha's wisdom. The Buddha's wisdom is extremely profound. Therefore, the Buddha refuses 3 times to proceed with his preaching, and his listeners entreat him 4 times to continue to preach. The preaching of the Lotus Sutra was accompanied by such difficulties. Compared to the Lotus Sutra, the preaching of the other sutras was an easy matter. In this commentary, Tian Tai uses the term Buddha's mind to indicate that the sutra, itself a physical entity, actually embodies the Buddha's spiritual aspect. Because the Lotus Sutra manifests the Buddha's spiritual aspect, when one embodies that spiritual aspect in a wooden or painted image possessing 31 features, the image in its entirety becomes the living Buddha. This is what is meant by the enlightenment of plants. It is for this reason that Tian Tai states, all things having color or fragrance are manifestations of the middle way. Commenting on this, Miao Lo adds, however, although people may admit that all things having color or fragrance are manifestations of the middle way, they are nevertheless shocked and harbor doubts when they hear for the first time the doctrine that insentient beings possess the Buddha nature. Cheng Quan of the Flower Garland School stole Tian Tai's doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, using it to interpret the Flower Garland Sutra. Then he wrote, both the Lotus and Flower Garland Sutras reveal the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. The Flower Garland Sutra, however, is the teaching of enlightenment for people of the sudden teaching, because it was preached earlier, while the Lotus Sutra is the teaching of enlightenment for people of the gradual teaching, because it was preached later. The Flower Garland Sutra is the root, because it preceded all the other sutras. The Lotus Sutra consists of nothing but branches and leaves. He puffed himself up like a mountain, thinking that he alone had mastered the true teaching. In reality, however, he did not know about the enlightenment of plants, the heart of the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Miao Lo ridiculed the ignorance Cheng Quan showed in the above-quoted statement. Our contemporary scholars of the Tendai school think that they alone have mastered the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Yet they equate the Lotus Sutra with the Flower Garland Sutra or with the Mahavairakana Sutra. Their arguments do not go beyond even Cheng Quan's views but remain on the same level as those of Shan Wu Wei and Pu Kung. In the final analysis, when the eye-opening ceremony for a newly made wooden or painted image is conducted by true word priests, the image becomes not a true Buddha but a Buddha of the provisional teachings. It does not even become a Buddha of the provisional teachings. Even though it may resemble the Buddha in appearance, in reality it remains the same insentient plant from which it originated. Moreover, it does not even remain an insentient plant, it becomes a devil or a demon. This is because the erroneous doctrine of the true word priests, expressed in mudras and mantras, becomes the mind of the wooden or painted image. This is like those instances in which the mind causes a person to alter and turn into a rock, as happened with Aluka or Kapila. Unless one who has grasped the essence of the Lotus Sutra conducts the eye-opening ceremony for a wooden or painted image, it will be as if a masterless house were to be occupied by a thief, or as if, upon death, a demon were to take possession of one's body. When, in present-day Japan, eye-opening ceremonies for the Buddha images are conducted according to the true word rite, demons occupy them and deprive people of their lives, for a demon is also known as a robber of life. Moreover, devils enter those images and deprive people of benefits. Another name for a devil is a robber of benefit. Because the people worship demons, they will bring the country to ruin in their present lifetime, and because they revere devils, they will fall into the hell of incessant suffering in the next. When the spirit departs from the body after death, a demon may enter in its place and destroy one's descendants. This is what is meant by a hungry demon that devours even itself. However, if a wise person extols the Lotus Sutra and inspirits the dead person's remains, then, although the deceased's body remains human, that person's mind will become the Dharma body. This accords with the doctrine that one can in one's present form attain the stage where one perceives the non-birth and non-extinction of the phenomenal world. A wise person who has mastered the perfect teaching of the sutras of the flower garland, correct, and equal, or wisdom period can bring a dead person's remains into the stage of realizing the non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena. This is what the Nirvana Sutra means when it states, although his body remains human, his mind will become equal to that of the Buddha. Chunda set an example of attaining in his present body the realization of the non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena. If a wise person enlightened to the Lotus Sutra conducts a service for a deceased person, the deceased's body, just as it is, will become the Dharma body. This is what the phrase "in one's present form" means. Then the wise person will retrieve the departed spirit, bring it back into the remains of the deceased, and transform it into the Buddha's mind. This is what the phrase attaining Buddhahood indicates. The words "in one's present form" represent the physical aspect, and attaining Buddhahood, the spiritual. The deceased person's physical and spiritual aspects will be transformed into the mystic reality and mystic wisdom of beginningless time. This is attaining Buddhahood in one's present form. Thus the Lotus Sutra states, this reality, of all phenomena, consists of the appearance, the body of the dead person, nature, the mind, entity, the true entity of body and mind. It also reads, he profoundly understands the signs of guilt and good fortune, and illuminates the 10 directions everywhere. His subtle, wonderful pure Dharma body is endowed with the 32 features. In this last quotation, the first 2 lines indicate the realization of the non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena, and the latter 2, the attainment of Buddhahood in one's present form. The model of the latter is the Dragon King's daughter, while that of the former is Chunda.